Hi, welcome to today's CLE. My name is Ayub Ajmi. I'm the Director of Legal Innovation and Technology here at UMKC School of Law. So today we will be talking about artificial intelligence, and more precisely, we will focus a lot on generative AI. So we will talk about the foundation of generative AI. We will talk about the foundation of artificial intelligence as well. So we'll focus a lot on the ethical use of AI and how we can use it in a way to protect our users' information and to help us in a way to support the way we provide legal services. In the end of this presentation, I will share with you some practical uses of AI in the legal field. So before we do that, I have one request for you, which is to participate in this anonymous survey. So every time I do a presentation in the topic of AI, I like to ask the audience to tell us how they use generative AI. By now, we have all seen generative AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, or some other tools. So I'm pretty sure many of you have used AI, and I'm interested to know what areas have you used it for. And if not, if you are using other tools, I would love to know what other tools you are using, or if you are not using it, you can tell us a little bit more. This is anonymous, so you can use the short link in the screen, or you can scan the QR code. I'm going to leave those two in the upcoming screen, and hopefully you all will have a chance to participate in the survey. In the end of the survey, it will take you to a page where you can see the results of what your colleagues today have answered. So before we jump into talking about AI, I want to take you back 12 years ago when the ABA released the model rule on technology competency. They added a comment to the existing competency for lawyers. As lawyers, you have to stay abreast of the law. You have to always update yourself and know what's going on with the law and the area where you practice. Well, the same is true for technology. You have to stay abreast of technology. So this has nothing to do with AI. This is general. You have to use technology. Ignorance is not an excuse anymore. So you have to know the benefits of technology, and you have to know the risk associated of using technology. I'm guessing in the last few years, many of us have been immersed in technology in so many ways. Even those of us who were not using technology heavily because of the pandemic and the lockdown, we all switched to remote work. We all switched to video conferencing, and you know the risk that are associated with that. In the past few years, there was an important increase in cyber attack, ransomware, and those are all risks that we have to mitigate right now, as we don't have any choice. You have to use technology to do your work. So how can you do that in a way that is safe? Well, the same thing now apply for generative AI. Generative AI is here to stay. Soon there will not be an option whether you want to use it or not. So how can we do that in a way that is risk free and support us and not harm what we do? So the other thing, in addition to the ABA model rule, ABA periodically releases and passes resolution for guidance on lawyers on how to use AI in general. Many of those resolutions for the last few years focused on bias in artificial intelligence, the need for explainability. We don't like this black box where we don't know how the decision is made, especially when it comes to legal field. There is a need for transparency, and there is a need for ethical use of AI in general. The other thing that is very important is we want to have some sort of control and oversight of the AI as a technology, but also over the AI that is provided by our vendors. We can't just accept a technology without asking certain questions. So in this presentation, I will go through some of those questions that you need to ask your vendors, you need to know before you jump in and use certain artificial intelligence systems. But as I explained before, we are already using AI. You probably, even if you don't know it, you're probably using it. You are using it in your Microsoft Word, with autocorrect. You are using it on your email when you have a spam folder. There is an AI behind that. There is an AI that learned to detect spam language and spam links and automatically take that email away from inbox and put it on quarantine in a separate folder. AI has been used in legal field for many years. It has been used in legal research for more than 10 years, and it's now being increasingly used in risk assessments to determine bond, to determine many areas of the law. AI is used when you buy a new cell phone plan based on certain criteria that sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. You may get a different deal that someone else will get. The same is available for credit scoring and so many other areas in your daily life. So this is when we talk about AI, AI is not new. What is new, however, is the generative aspect of AI. So the generative aspect of AI started maybe a decade ago, where it became there were a lot of research done in that field, but in the last 2 years, especially with the launch of ChatGPT, it became more accessible to us. It became more accessible because we have this super easy to use interface called ChatGPT, where you can just type an answer, a question, and it will give you an answer without having to know to learn how to code, without having to know anything. So that's what made the generative AI so accessible. That's what made it so easy to use and so popular. So this is really what changed. It's just the idea that is more accessible. That is something that we can see, that we can try ourselves without having to go through programming or through a third party provider to give us that information. So there are some concepts that I believe we will all need to know to make informed decisions about the tools we use and how to use them. So for this presentation, we need to explain what is machine learning, what is natural language processing. So both of those are subset of what is known as artificial intelligence. And I promise I will keep it super simple so we can all learn and we can all follow. So in its basic form, machine learning can happen in two manners. It could happen in a supervised way, and it could happen in an unsupervised way. In a supervised learning, the algorithm is trained on labeled data set, which means that the input data comes with corresponding output labels. To put it into an easy way to understand, let's take an example in the human resources field. And when we have an open position and we receive thousands of resumes, no human can process those resumes. So what we do, we use AI. We use AI to process those resumes. So the way it works is that we take a bunch of resumes from past hire with the hiring decision. So those resumes are added into the AI, but they are added with labels that say this person was accepted, this application was rejected, and that's what we feed into the artificial intelligence. That's what we feed into the algorithm. And then what the algorithm does is the algorithm will learn to recognize those patterns. It learns to recognize those patterns in the resume that are associated with successful hires, and then can apply that knowledge to new resumes that we ask for. So what we have to do next, we have this user interface, for example, and all we need to do is someone will apply and the system will automatically detect that resume, use the data set that we provided to the algorithm, and then can quickly and automatically, without any human intervention, say this is bad, this is bad, this is good, this is good, this is bad, and so forth. So this is an example of supervised learning where we provide the information and we provide the labels for that information. So it's easy for the system to apply that information to new resumes that the system have not necessarily seen. In an unsupervised learning, the algorithm is given data without instructions. So what does it mean? Unlike the resume example we talked about previously, where we provide the resume and we provide the hiring decision, in an unsupervised learning, we try to find patterns and relationship in the data in its own. The system does this by itself. So this is the practical example for is, let's say with the human resources, for example, we have a bunch of reports, we have annual reviews, we have surveys, and then we combine, and this is too much information that a human can sit in and can detect pattern, for example. So when we feed that information into the system, so we feed all those resources, and then we take those various attributes of the employee, such as job roles, performance metrics, and engagement, survey result, and all of that. So we provide all that information to the algorithm, with this data without labeling any particular outcomes. So the algorithm will identify natural grouping with this data. For instance, it might discover clusters of employees who exhibit similar engagement level or performance pattern, helping you to target interventions on training programs or for different groups. So this is a different way of using machine learning, which is very important because imagine this is new information that you didn't know exist. So you have all those reports, you have all those information, charts, whatever that information is, and the system by itself will group that data into clusters that make sense to you. So again, in summary, the supervised machine learning is training the algorithm with past decisions to predict the future outcomes. In unsupervised machine learning, it helps uncover insight that might not immediately be apparent to us as humans. So let's now talk about the generative AI. For me, the easy way, the most basic way to explain generative AI is to do the example of a king minus man. So in the screen right now, you can see I put this question on ChatGPT 4. ChatGPT 4 is with subscription, so it's not free. I think it's $20 a month subscription, and you get the somewhat powerful large language model that you can use. So when you put king minus man into the chat GPT, the answer that you will get is queen. So I guess you probably guessed the answer. For me, I always like to ask a follow-up question to ChatGPT, which is very helpful. So you check the answer and you check where this answer is coming from. And then when I asked the ChatGPT to answer, the answer was very interesting. So it says as a large language model, it's trained on a large set of information. It's trained on everything that is published online. And then based on those patterns, it knows by training, by machine learning that we talked about previously, that usually when king minus man, it's associated with queen. So this is how it could come up with that answer. If we take the same question and then if we put it on ChatGPT 3.5, which is the free version, we get a different set of answers. If we put it on a 3.5, which is an older large language model, the answer is ing. And again, I did not understand how or why it gave that answer, so I asked ChatGPT. And then the answer is, it's basically like a puzzle word. It plays with the word and then it plays with the characters and then it subtracts certain things and then the result is ing. It's not really a wrong answer, but it's not the answer that you probably will guess. It does not make sense as the previous answer, which was queen. So this gives you an idea of how large language models work. So large language models, as a lot of people probably know by now, it's there to please us. It always will give us an answer. And that answer, it's not coming from the system. The answer is coming from guessing what's the next word that it could give you based on what it has seen. So the more information it knows, the potentially the answer will be better and will be different. So this is in general, in the most basic way, how large language models work. So let's talk about terminology now. So we all know OpenAI. So OpenAI is a company. It has a product. This product is called ChatGPT. ChatGPT, it's based on a model. That model is called GPT. Other providers use GPT. For example, Microsoft uses a GPT model. They don't use ChatGPT. You have the contract with Microsoft. You use Microsoft product. But Microsoft product, its intelligence, it's based on the GPT model. So recently, there is a new model. This new model is called GPT-4o. It's potentially better and faster than GPT-4. So you can see the pattern here. So we have the company, they create the model, and then based on that model, they create the product that they sell to their customers. But they also use they also have a business based on that model itself that they can give access to certain providers. So let's dig a little bit deeper on large language models. GPT is not the only player in the field, so there are other providers, but those are pretty large companies who can afford to build large language models. And this is the important key that we will discuss later. So GPT-4, it's from OpenAI. As you can see, it is used, the model is used by Microsoft, Duolingo, Zapier, Dropbox, and of course, ChatGPT. Well, who are the other players? Well, Google. Google is one of them. They have Gemini. Previously, it was branded as Bard, so they changed the branding to Gemini. It is not used by many, I guess, I don't know if it's used by any other company, but I know that Google is using it in its own services, in their search engine, in their email, and we probably will see that introduced to other of their services. Another player is Meta. Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook. They build their own large language models. The difference between the prior ones, this one is open source. This is free, and it's as powerful as GPT-4, which is very interesting. GPT is not cheap. It's very expensive to have, and now you have this large language models that almost equivalent, and it is free. So this is going to change the dynamics, because a lot of companies now, if they have to pick, they will probably pick a free open source that they can have control over that black box. Remember when we talked earlier about one of the issues that the ABA and the other organizations advise us on doing is to know how the AI is making the decision. When you are using ChatGPT, when you are using Gemini, you won't know that because it's a proprietary system. However, when you are using Llama from Meta and Facebook, that's an open source system that you can see how it's working and you know how your data is being handled. This is a game changer, and I think more services will be built on top of LLM like Llama than on top of a GPT. Other providers, we have Anthropic, they have Claude, and we also have XAI that they have Krog. So now let's talk about issues that we have with large language models. And one of them is the bias. So algorithms are not inherently discriminatory, and engineers rarely intentionally introduce bias into the algorithms. However, bias often creeps into the recruiting process, for example, searching, screening, interviewing. So how does it happen? So we're going to go through some examples talking about machine learning that we had addressed in the past. So the bias can be more prominent in supervised learning. If the training data contains biases, the algorithm will learn and replicate those biases in its predictions. In our resume screening, for example, if past hiring decisions were biased, for example, if the hiring decision were favoring certain demographics or certain individuals with certain backgrounds, the training data will reflect those biases. And as a result, the algorithm might continue to favor the same demographics, perpetuating existing biases. So this is in supervised learning. The bias can also occur in unsupervised learning, but it's usually what the developer decide to measure and how they measure it. It's different than in supervised learning. So since the algorithm finds pattern based on the data it is given, any inherent biases in the data can lead to biases in the grouping, in the clustering that unsupervised learning will create. In our employee clustering, for example, if certain groups being overrepresented in high performance clusters, for example, due to unequal opportunities, the resulting clusters may reinforce those biases. This could lead to unfair treatment or interventions based on groupings. So it's not the data itself, but how the data was structured, how the parameters were structured. So it's completely different. So let's take an example in practice. So this is from 2016. This is an article by ProPublica. So this is an example where a risk assessment software was used to determine the likelihood of someone committing crimes in the future. This is a typical system that is currently used used in several places to determine bonds or sentencing for that matter. So we have this person, Brisha Borden. She's 18 years old. She was running late to pick up her god sister from school. She spotted an unlocked kid's bicycle and a kid's scooter. So Brisha and her friend, they grabbed those bike and scooter. They tried them. They figured out it's too small for them. They tossed them away, but it was too late. Someone has already called 911, and they were arrested for theft of item at the value of $80. On the right screen, we have Vietnam, 41 years old. He was arrested during the same time, approximately, at Home Depot, stealing hardware and tools worth $86. So we have the same value. Both of them were arrested in jail. Both of them were they used a software called Compass. This is a software risk assessment that predicts likelihood of someone committing future crimes. So the software decided that Brisha was higher risk of committing a crime than Vernon. The important thing here is that when we look at their data more closely, we see clearly that Vernon is a higher risk than Brisha. In fact, 2 years after this arrest, Vernon was arrested and convicted for an armed robbery, and he's saving 7 or 8 years jail time. So this is an example of a bias in the system. Someone who clearly is not that high of a risk became a risk for certain parameters that the system has that made that person more high risk than the other. In another example, so this is a software that uses machine learning to predict healthcare needs and problems. Here is, as we discussed earlier, the algorithm relied on healthcare spending to predict future health needs. So what does it mean? In areas with less access to care, historically, Black patients often spend less in healthcare. So the result is that those Black patients had to be much sicker to be recommended for extra care under this algorithm. You can see how this is an example of unsupervised learning, where it doesn't really know those patients, it doesn't really know the race, but it does know from the spending. And the way the system was programmed is the wrong way. Thus, it gives results like this. One more example. So this is a team in Amazon. They were working on a recruiting tool to help assess candidates and screening resume. So this tool uses machine learning, was trained on Amazon's 10 years worth of recruiting data. Those are hires and successful hires and unsuccessful hires, as we discussed in our example with resume. So the AI tools learned to penalize resumes that indicated women or women-related terms or activities such as sports or even women-only colleges. So without any training, in an unsupervised way, the AI showed bias. The reason is because the majority of data that it was trained on was largely from men, as it is common in tech industry. So you can see the pattern. So the system is not itself biased. The data can be flawed, or the way it is programmed can be an issue. So there is a Supreme Court that addressed the issue with Compass. So the Supreme Court decision held that the trial court's use of algorithm risk assessment in sentencing did not violate the due process rights. And even though the methodology used to produce the assessment was not disclosed, neither to the court nor to the defendant. So this is in not to the case we discussed earlier, but it's a similar case where the same software was used to determine sentencing for a person in Wisconsin. So this is in relation to the case that we talked about in 2016. So the three researchers went through the methodology that ProPublica used to assess Compass and determine if it's biased or not. And what happened is both ProPublica and the team doing the research, they were not wrong. Both of them were right. So the difference was because of what they used to measure for fairness. Basically, it's the way the system was programmed. That's what made the difference. So no matter which way your dials are set, any algorithm will have biases. it is, after all, making prediction based on generalized statistics, not on someone's individual situation. When AI is built with transparency and based on good data, we can still use such systems to guide decisions that are wiser and fairer than the one humans tend to do. If you remember the New York stop and frisk, 88% of arrests that were made were on people with minorities like blacks and Hispanics, although they make up 50% of the white individuals make 50% of the population, but 88% of arrests were non-white. So those are human biases, and there is a study that shows that parole boards were more likely to free convicts if the judge had a lunch or meal break. So if you ask me, I would rather deal with the bad AI than deal with a hungry judge. So this is what shows really what I want to emphasize is the tool is not what create the biases. It's not the AI, but the way AI is built, the way AI is programmed, and the way a software is programmed to take and the outcome that the AI is providing. So what can we do to mitigate those biases in hiring, for example, or in other fields? Well, we know from the recommendation from the ABA and other studies that we need to have better data collection. We need to be very careful on what data we feed into the system. If that data is flawed, if that data has bad information, it's garbage in, garbage out. So the output will be bad. We need to have transparency on those AI models. And this is remind you again of the difference between ChatGPT and Llama models. One of them is a black box. You have no idea how it works, what decision is made. And the second one is open source, where you can see how it works. You can have some sort of control. And the last thing that is also important, you always have to have human loop. The reality is, for example, if we take the issue with the resume screening, often you will have a position and you have hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants, and it's not really realistic to have human. The whole idea of using machine is to not have humans spend that much time reviewing resumes. So this is human loop is important, but at some point you have to build the machine, you have to test the machine, and you just have to assume that the output is working. In certain high risk situation, human loop is definitely important and must be there. Okay, so what are we doing about the regulations of AI and this decision making decision tools? So we have some states that are enacted some laws. Illinois, Maryland, New York, and Texas are example. And you can see that they target, for example, video interviews. They target transparency that we talked about. They talked the openness. For example, if you are using a tool in New York to AI to determine someone if they will get work or not, you have to let them know, and you have to give them an option to opt out of that artificial intelligence. So this is all new, and things may change. The way those technology work change, and I'm guessing that the law will change as well. At the federal level, we now have a federal policy, a roadmap or a set of recommendations. It outlines suggested areas of focus and actions for the U.S. and the Congress to consider in relationship to artificial intelligence, particularly regarding the impact in various domains, including workforce and how we provide services. And then on the left of the screen, I didn't have time to go read the entire report. It's like 66 pages. So I just used that report, upload it to OpenAI, and told OpenAI to give me a bullet point of how this law may impact hiring decisions and the law, for example, and those are the answers. So here you go. There's a good use of AI to save us time. The other thing I want to emphasize is artificial intelligence it's here, it's gonna stay, and we have just to learn how to use it. I don't really think like banning AI is a solution, but more having regulations that will help with the development and help to make us improve those systems rather than halt the development or not use it as some organizations may decide. All right. So one of the issues that we have, in addition to bias, we have the issues of security, and this is something that is important: confidentiality of information. As lawyers, confidentiality is one of the model rules that we have to follow. We have if you remember a few years ago, we had discussions about the cloud, whether to use the cloud, whether to not use the cloud. Is the cloud safe? I think nobody is asking that question anymore, especially after the pandemic and after the switch to remote work. We're all using the cloud now. I will argue that not using the cloud is a security risk, because there is a high risk where your data could be breached if you are in an old server with no backup, with no firewall, with no security measure, that if you are using one of the popular cloud systems that are very secured. So the same thing will apply to AI. How can we make our use cases, our client information secured? So two things I will say: we have to read the term of service, and then we have to know how this technology works. So if you look at the terms of service of OpenAI, for example, we can see this is a snippet from their open source and of their terms of service, and then we can see a few things that are very important to deal with the security issues we may have. So first, you retain ownership of the input output. So what does it mean? When you type something into OpenAI, ChatGPT, it's your information, and whatever information you get out of it, it's yours as well. So you own that. At the same time, OpenAI may or may not use your information to improve their services. This is a typical thing that with softwares that sometimes you will tell you, for example, if you have Adobe crash and then you get an error message that say, hey, would you like to report this error to Adobe so we can perfect and we make our service better? It's kind of the same thing. This is how I see that. However, there is an option within OpenAI to opt out of using your information for training. So that information, I don't believe it's available in free services. And this has reminded me of something very important. Don't use free services. If service is free, you or your client are probably the product. So I will stay away from anything that is free, especially in the fields like this that it's still new and we don't really know how it works. So OpenAI, when you have a paid subscription, there is an option where you can toggle a button and say, I don't want to use I don't want you to use my information for training. Better than that, try to use an enterprise level. If OpenAI has an enterprise level as well, but the same as other providers that use the GPT model. If you remember the table at the beginning of the presentation, Microsoft used the GPT model. And then when you have a contract with Microsoft, as many of you do, you have Microsoft Outlook, you have Microsoft 365. So that's an enterprise level. That's a high security contract that you have with Microsoft. So you can guarantee you it's secured and you can use it. So Microsoft also is 49% or 48% owner of OpenAI. They do have access to GPT model without having to send your information back to OpenAI. You can still benefit from the large language models while your information stays secured. You are in a cluster, in a sandbox that only give access to your own information. And then, as you can see, they don't use it for training. They don't share that information. They don't sell your information. They don't send it back to OpenAI. Everything stays within your service. All right, so this takes me to another slide that I think is as important. You are probably being bombarded by emails from providers telling you that they have the best AI, that they're going to make your life better and then maybe 10x your productivity level. You have to be very careful, especially when a vendor tells you that they build their own LLM. OpenAI spent $90 million to build 3.5, GPT 3.5, large language model. They spent $500 million to build the GPT-4 model. Not many companies can afford that. That's why we only have the three big players doing this. Many of the other companies, they are not building their LLMs. They are using other things built on top of existing LLMs. So they use fine tuning, they use API integration, they use prompt engineering, and they use what is known as RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So we will talk about two of those examples here, just to give you an idea of how can you build a system that uses generative AI on top of existing LLM models without having to spend millions and billions of dollars to build your own large language models. But takes me to the ethical duty of efficiency. As a lawyer, you have the duty to provide a reasonable diligence and promptness in representing your clients. You also have a duty to provide reasonable fees. If you can use a tool to lower the fee, you have to do that. You can't, for example, not knowing that there is a tool out there that is secure and that is working and is going to cut the time by half or more, and you decide not to use it. That's not really ethical. So we have the duty of moving forward to learn those tools, learn what you can do with them, and learn how you can save the time that you spend on dealing with clients' information. So how is AI being used in the field? So AI in legal research, as you may guess, there are some hit and miss, and there are many horror stories of attorneys who were using OpenAI ChatGPT to write briefs and submit them to the court without really paying attention to what they are doing. So it didn't go well because AI can hallucinate and can provide fake cases. This is really not a surprise. If they spend the time to know how those tools work, they probably will know that they should not rely on them blindly. As I said previously, GPT models, and LLM models in general, they are here to please us. They will always give you an answer. So you have to be very careful. There are certain things that you should not really use with large language models, and one of them is legal research. You will be better off asking a librarian to do the research than trying to do it on your own using GPT. Of course, there are better tools out there that use large language models to provide legal services, but I bet you those attorneys who got in trouble, they did not know that. And this takes us to the first rule of competency. You have to assess the tools. You are responsible for the tool you are using, and you are the one responsible for the information that you file with the court. And that's why those attorneys were in trouble. Attorneys are not the only one who got in trouble. Pro se litigants also got in trouble for using generative AI. There is a case in Eastern District in Missouri where a pro se litigant used OpenAI to file an appeal. In his brief, he cited 22 cases, and then 17 of them were completely fake cases. 5 of them had the same name. As you can guess, it got in so much trouble. In addition to other stuff he was doing that should not be doing, in total he got fined like $10,000, and his appeal was rejected. For me, the sad thing that happened is that the district now banned the use of AI for pro se litigants. I personally don't really understand. This is the only case. I don't really know any court in the US that is banning pro se litigants from using generative AI. I know that some judges, they want attorneys to disclose the use of AI, which is also kind of really, I don't know how you can enforce that, but to go to this extreme of banning pro se litigants from using AI and naming specific product, it does not really make any sense, because there are more goods of pro se litigants that they can get with using generative AI in terms of access to justice than the bad. And just blindly banning it, I personally don't think is the right decision. But that's just my personal opinion. At the same time, there are good stories out of the court where attorneys have been using AI to lower the cost, to streamline their work, or to provide better services. So it's not all bad stories, but as you know, bad stories are always the one that sticks. And unfortunately, we just have to do our research and understand how those tools work. And more than that, we have an ethical duty of supervision. So you are responsible for the output, and you are responsible for what you add, what you provide to the court. So how can we not be in the news, basically? Let's start with learning something that is very important at this time for working with large language models. And those are some examples that companies like K-Stacks, Lexis Plus AI, Perplexity, and other are using to make their legal research powerful and research in general free of hallucinations, for example. So we use what is known prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is the language you use to talk to large language models. When you talk to large language models, there are some skills that you have to learn to get the best outcome. So the first thing you need to do is always give instructions. Instructions is basically you give instructions to the LLM. You tell the LLM how to act, what persona they can have. For example, you can tell an LLM you are a legal assistant helping an attorney with writing a memo or the letter. This makes a huge difference than just asking general. So that makes the large language model focus their research, change the tone, the way they write, and all of that. You can say you are helping pro se litigants, so the output need to be in plain English, 5th grade level, not use any jargon and legalese. Those are instructions that you can give to an AI. You can ask the question, but you can also add data to your question. For example, you can upload document like I did with the federal guidance on AI. That's a 66 pages PDF that I don't really have time to read it at this time. So all I did, I input that information into OpenAI and give it my instructions. And then the other thing you can do is use examples. You can use examples on how to deal with, how to write a letter, for example. If you have a format, if you have a template, as many lawyers do, you can use that with OpenAI so that you can tell the system, write me a letter based on this example. And then I can guarantee you the difference in the result will be very noticeable if you do this without examples, if you do this without prompt engineering. The other example that some of the providers are using is RAG. RAG is a retrieval augmented generation. Basically, we augment the search. In a typical case, when you are dealing with large language model, you ask the question, the LLM will give you an answer. It's very straightforward. That answer comes from all the web. It could be anything, and that's why we get bad information. That's why we get hallucination, because it's very broad, and the internet has so many contradicting information that sometimes the LLM will not know how to handle that. So one solution that we are testing with and many providers are using is by adding a layer before we hit the LLM. So if you are in an organization that you have your knowledge base, that you have your information that you created, that you know it's good and you know it's true, then instead of searching the web, we search your knowledge base first. And then from there, we feed that information to the LLM so it can give us a human-like answer that we can use to generate the answer in a way that is understandable for users and the way that is based on your own information. So this is what RAG is, and I will briefly share an example on how we used RAG to provide and to create a chatbot. So one last duty I want to talk about is the duty to make legal services available. So as a lawyer, we have a duty to provide legal services for those who are unable to pay. We have a duty to improve the law and to improve the way we provide legal services. And as many of you know, our judicial system, it's not accessible. 92% of Americans don't have representation, especially in areas, civil matters where family and children are involved, civil cases where most people will have to deal with those issues on their own. And as you can guess, many of them are unsuccessful, or they just simply don't seek any relief because they don't really know how to do it. I think generative AI is huge opportunities, prevent huge opportunities to us right now to improve access, to bridge the access to justice gap. And I want to share with you one example how we used a large language model to build a chatbot that is used right now in the state of Nevada to support self-represented litigants. As you know, self-represented litigants have a lot of needs. One of the needs that I always hear about is the need for information. When you go to a court website, many courts have their website. They have a lot of information, but over the years, that information become overwhelming, and worse, that information can be outdated. So when someone is navigating an issue and they go to a website, there is too much information. They are in a stress situation. They don't really know how to handle, and they don't really know what to make out that information. Add to that limitations of languages, limitations of other stress, like I said. So those are all prevent people from accessing information. By using large language models, we created a chatbot that someone can ask a question about areas of the law, such as divorce, name change, custody, or just simply ask for court information. This chatbot is based on RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and I want to walk you quickly through this so you can see this example. And there is also a link where you can test this on your own. If you scan this QR code, or if you go to the self-help portal for the state of Nevada, you will see an icon for chatbot in the lower right corner. If you click on it, you will see this page, and then from here, users can interact with the chatbot and ask questions. So let's go through an example. So we have a question. So someone needs a question. This question that you can see here, there is an issue with neighbors where they are about noise. There is a threat, and there are some things there that could be very confusing, especially the language is not really straightforward. This is something that a typical decision tree chatbot might not understand or know how to handle. So what we do is, instead of sending that question to the LLM, we send it first to our knowledge base. In our knowledge base, we have a lot of information that deals with protection orders, but it also deals with two types of protection orders: domestic violence and stalking, and basically in this example, neighbors. So we know from the language that those are neighbors, so DV is out. We provide information about stalking. We also know that there is the person is seeking guidance. We know that we have a guided interview to help them generate that petition. And then the last thing, we know that there is a threat. So our system has what we call system prompts. Like what I discussed in the earlier slide about prompts, we tell the system how to act. We tell the system, hey, you are helping people in the state of Nevada and state of Nevada only. If someone is from a different jurisdiction, we don't have that information, so don't try to give them an answer. And then we also tell them, if you feel like there is a threat from the language, you probably should tell them to call 911 first. So we put all that information in the system, and the system is how we control how the chat could interact. And the system is a long, like 2 or 3 pages that we wrote so we can target and we can safeguard the system. And then what we do next is we take the original question, we take the answers from our knowledge base that we know is true and accurate, and then we take the system prompt and we send that to GPT-4 large language models, and then from there we get an answer. As you can see, this answer is plain English. It has empathy. It understands what the issue is based on the input that the user has put. We provide them with the link to file the petition on their own, and we also tell them, hey, if you feel immediate danger, you probably need to call 911. So this is very important. It took us over a year just try to test it and make sure it's working, and I'm pleased to report that is right now live and is already helping hundreds of users just in the past few weeks that are interacting with this chatbot. This is the example for pro se litigant, but the same RAG, retrieval augmented generation, can be used, for example, in internal systems. If you are a law firm that you have your templates, you have your explanations, you have your knowledge base, you can use large language models like OpenAI GPT to search, to interact with that data, and then to make sense of your data. One thing that the system could do also is the user are not just getting an answer. They can interact with this answer. For example, they can ask follow-up questions. They can ask to summarize. They can also ask to translate. More than that, this system can handle more than 50 languages. So our knowledge base is in English. The output is in English, but it does understand any language. So we can translate the input to English, get the answer in English, and then translate it back to the user's own language. So this is transformative. This is going to change the way courts and legal services provide their services to users. And I'm certain that this will provide a lot of help to people who are not able to access legal services. Of course, if you have access to legal presentation, it's always the best outcome. But unfortunately, we know that this is not the case for many of our population. So I hope that you enjoyed this talk. My takeaway is, first, make sure you have an AI policy. If you don't have one, create one so that your associate, your interns, your clerks know what they can do, what they can't do, and make sure that your data is safe and your customers' data is safe. The second thing is, test those tools. You don't have to test it with real data. You can create fake accounts and try with public information just so you understand how they work, and then create a use case. Come up with a use case that you know could be helpful and see if the AI gonna work. And if you decide that this is gonna work, then try to find collaboration, try to work with others to build the tools that you need. If you are looking for collaboration, UMKC is the best place to collaborate with. We have the Legal Technology Lab. This is a consortium of more than 12 law schools where we create projects. This is a community of lawyers, technologists, and the community people where we talk about law and technology and how we can use it to improve access to justice. We have a listserv for more than 200 individuals. If you would like to join us, visit the website, the Legal Tech Lab. The Legal Technology Lab is part of the CLAI. The CLAI is the Center for Law, Entrepreneurship, and Innovation. We have been collaborating for a decade, and this is just a continuation of what we do. So again, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me by email or connect with me in LinkedIn.